Hello and welcome to the Organic Wormhole, episode 10. Mr. Smiley, medically fit, and of course, the Pharmacy Seed Network. Carlton, how are you boys doing this evening? Not everybody at once, eh?
We're good. We're good. I'm trying to figure out my camera.
And
I don't
hopefully,
know.
you guys
Yeah,
had.
we're just dealing with the snowstorm here in Colorado, like we were just talking about in the background before we decided to go live. And being here in Pueblo, like most of it's already melted. We had mainly rain overnight, where everybody else got almost 2 foot, like 20 minutes south, north, west. Everybody got pounded, and we kind of got blessed at mainly rain.
Boy, you guys can keep that snow.
Hey, the mountains. Some of the people on Instagram that I follow were posting like the Western Slope, and she has horses, and the snow was up to the horse's chest. I mean, it was that high, and the snow wasn't even done. So that's like 3 to 4 foot high already.
Yeah, no, I'm good on that. We haven't seen, and this is Michigan. We don't even see fucking snow like that. Holy cow. So let's start it off like this. I've got it. Well, Mr. Trump hopefully will be here soon enough to come hang out and talk with us. But until then, I got a question for you boys. For those people like myself who want to be in soil, but necessarily there isn't a local grocery store around, you know what I mean, anywhere soon or anywhere close, 30 miles. 30 miles is like the closest grocery store for me. So, what would be some good alternatives? Where to get some good soil? I mean, can we trust the box store shit? I mean, there's some good and bads from, just grabbing some organic shit from the old fucking box store, or where if you don't have a grocery store or don't have a good source of soil close to you, where should you start?
Some of the box store stuff, I guess when I think of that, I'm like thinking, what's the fucking brand? Like they've been having the Fox Farm shit in there. Like Strawberry Fields is the one I remember seeing there. But yeah, that's a tough question. You can always go around about it trying to mix something too, and trying to put together your own base, or like trying to start with a generic base and add to it possibly. I don't know. Those would be a couple options. But
Well, if I lived in the Midwest like I used to back in Iowa, Missouri, somewhere that had some topsoil, I think I could start there. Go out a little bit of forest area or in my backyard and do some digging and maybe just get a couple pots with the soil to get things going. I mean, that would be an easy place if you wanted to start somewhere. If you had some money, you wanted bags, well, you can go to Walmart's just about everywhere. A big R or some type of farm and country small mom and pop store that has little, like a little seed, I guess, gardening area with like hoses, and you'll find some little bit of bag soil, some of them. The stuff that most of us don't want to use, like Miracle Grow, but it's available.
Yeah, I guess I'll weigh in on this. Um, yeah, bag soils. All right. I've seen everything from awesome bag soils and bag soil performance to horrible. And I've seen that across the same brand from the same supplier over timelines. So what I would say is if you're going to buy bag soil, do the research locally, talk to other growers, gardeners, farmers in your area who use those soils for starting seeds, or growing plants. Find out what they use, find out what stuff they've had trouble with, because they'll tell you what they've had trouble with. They'll be ticked about it because it'll cause them problems. And when they figure out what that soil problem is, they won't be using that anymore. So that's one way to pick up warning flags. I'll give you an example. A while back, like 2011, 2012, a bunch of guys we were using Fox Farm Ocean Forest as our starter soil. Stuff was fantastic initially. Then later they changed their batch source mix and something happened. You got like infested with bugs and imbalances in nutrients and all kinds of problems. And all of a sudden all the grows went sideways because of it. So like it was a good supplier, a good source of soil, but then they changed their source. They didn't even know they made a mistake until they were already down the road. So for me, after all the experience I've had with that, and I've seen that with Coast of Maine now too, the last batch of Coast of Maine soil I had was not really quite right. It wasn't right. And so now I mix my own soil. And for me, that's easy for now. I want to expand and make this a better system. But for now, I buy a Bala Pro mix. I buy that Kiss Organics mix, and that gives me a nice base mix. And I can just throw, a cup and a half per 10-gallon of container and blend it in, and at least have a base mix. In 2 weeks, it's cooked, and I know what's in it, and I know the sources are clean. There's no heavy metal contaminants. I'm starting with a baseline. So that's my 2 cents of it.
I've got a couple more 2 cents. When I lived in the San Luis Valley, we had like Salida. It had a gardening center, and they actually had where I can go get topsoil or mulch or compost. So even like feed store, gardening center, places like that, in smaller towns, not necessarily big cities, most of them will have some type of soil available. So you guys can go check that out to at least get like a starting soil. Beware of compost from a lot of municipalities. A lot of them have a lot of stuff in it we really don't want. And so just be careful on that. Really make sure you're checking what kind of compost you're getting. If you get compost from municipalities that are doing compost shit. The other is we're all talking about bag soil, and some of us know about the Soil King issue. A lot of bad soil that came through, a lot of lawsuits that are happening. So, I don't know how most of us feel or you guys feel about Patrick and the Soil King and what he did in the industry with the soil he made for people, or if you guys didn't really care for it. But that's, part of the industry that things like that happen.
Well, I think it's important to be, honest, forthright with your product. I mean, if it's, some being somewhat mixed and supplied by somebody else, then, the third party and then slapping their name on it, I think that should be transparent a little bit. But a lot of companies do that though. Have a mixing company, and then, nutrient companies are the same. You
Well,
can
look
go
at
to some of these nutrient companies and tell them, hey, I want this, this, and this, and put my name on it, and you have a nutrient lineup. Same thing kind of with the soils. You can go to a soil company and go, I want this, my recipe to be, mix it up, throw it in a bag for me. But again, now what's their sources? You know what I mean? Does
well,
it
look at
meet your
Subcool.
standards?
You remember when Subcool had a problem when people wanted to start making his super soil and doing large batches of it, and he couldn't get people to like meet the demand, and so he just never went forward to have people really make super soil in large batches and sell it.
Yeah, I do remember that. But again, you better be there. You know what I mean? I'm one of them people. If it's got my name on it, I want to know quality control. You know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
The best thing, the one thing that's so when you mentioned Pro Mix, the Pro Mix is like really finely ground, and then the sphagnum peat moss, when you get it in a whole bale, this is another cool thing, but it's true. You get the large bale, then when you open that bale, it'll have a lot bigger fiber to it. It's like it has a lot bigger, almost wood pieces in it, I guess. And that has a lot more aeration to it, and that's a great way to start with a base mix. But the standard mix for any of the potting soil starts at a third of a peat moss or cocoa, a third of the aeration, and a third of the compost. And that's like the Cornell mix of the matter. So however you want to go about that, if you're sourcing things, that's a good baseline to kind of figure anything on. And then from there, really the right thing to do if you're trying to hit it for cannabis would be to send a sample in and get a test done on it, and then amend according to that test. And the reason being is that the compost that you would use can be a variable in the scenario, which would mean that sometimes that compost could have, some sources could have really high magnesium levels and you wouldn't know that. Some sources might have really high potassium levels and you wouldn't know that, even though you've mixed, say the two different soil batches would be totally different, but all you did was mix your third compost, you know what I mean? But even so, the batches would be totally different how you'd want to amend that. And you wouldn't know that without testing. So like if you are sourcing stuff, that's the kind of the right best way to go about it. But you can kind of take recipes and you can kind of use some calculation in your head and factor what you want to mix something too,
So what if you only had like $200, $150? What would you spend your money on to get started with? Because I know when I first, several times when I've had to start over, lost everything, had to start all over again. I only got a couple $100 to get going. What would you guys recommend to everybody else? Like I know I could only start off with a couple boxes of Down to Earth, like even a little bit of Promex or like 707. But I kind of like Nectar of the Gods, so I'd get a couple bags of Nectar of the Gods soil and use that just to kind of get going.
Well, that's what the question is. Same question right here.
Right?
That's the same. See, and I just started over. And that's
Mhm.
what I'm leading kind of up to here, And that's kind of what I'm waiting how bad I'm going to take the punches. I was feeling you guys how bad the punches are going to be when I fucking really say. So you're right. Fucking, that would be great to start off like that. But again, money not a factor really, but the source. Do I want to fucking have that shit delivered to my house because there isn't a grow store where I go pick up a bag of Nectar of the Gods? Or do I fucking run down to Home Depot and pick up some organic soil for cheap? So that's the question. I mean, how bad? I mean, my opinion, if it's labeled organic and it's got its ombre label there, it should be somewhat clean and safe. And now
No,
up to
no.
this point, okay, let me finish. Now my other consideration here is more like drainage. You know what I mean? Because some soils are soils, some fucking are muddy. That's what's key for me in my cannabis. So
So
I did
understand.
grab a bag of organic soil from, well, I'll tell you what it was. It was Kellogg's Organic Potting Soil Plus is what I chose. That's what these girls are in back here. So that is my starting point. So whether or not it keeps going and I mix to it in the future, but that
Mhm.
was the closest, cheapest available source for me. You know what I mean?
And
So
so
what do you guys think about
what
what's in the pots? I guess
why
is
be ashamed about that? Like that's what you have available to get started with. And that's the best you can do at the moment. And people don't understand that. People try to be these cultivators out here saying, I'm better than you and I can grow better than you and you don't grow my quality. Really, it's that's not what this is about. Okay. Everybody's trying to do the best they can with what they have at the moment. Not everybody has thousands of dollars to invest in a grow. Not everybody has a couple $100 to invest in a grow. Sometimes people get down on their luck, lose everything, and have to rebuild and starting over, man. It's hard.
well, even
I've been
like you're
there.
saying already there, Ahmed, that bag
What's
right there was 11 fucking dollars versus probably the 30 that at least I would have probably paid for the nectar bag, right? So we're
right?
talking about a third of the cost to get started. You know what I mean? But is that soil a good enough base to kind of keep going? Is it gonna have, what are your thoughts on like the distance? Because most of these plants, like I normally, like I do, are up potted in that fresh soil, 1 to 3. Usually, it would be to the 3 to the 10, and then flipped. Is that? Do you think they're gonna have enough to go the distance? Yeah, you know what I mean. Is there bad shit in there for flower?
I say if you're not ending flower within 6 months of that soil use, you're probably going to start running out of nutrients. Unless you're doing some type of feeding schedule to add a little bit here and there. Teas, compost teas, something to help get a little bit viable nutrients in it. I believe that, like my nectar of the God soil, I can get probably a run out of it 4 months, 2 months veg, 2 months flower. I may have a little bit left nutrients in it to try to mix up and get a second run out of it. But I know by the time my second flower run comes, that plant will not have enough nutrients in that soil. So if a bag's gonna get me a flower cycle at least for $11, and you can do some compost teas or something, simple just to help get a little nutrient biology into it. Perfect.
Right on. So I probably will at some point use. I still have some happy ending teas laying
Well, my latest run, I've been using just water. I haven't been using any teas. It was the super soil mix, what I had left, and that was it. And I wanted to do a run without any type of teas. It's just been waters, a little bit of sugar water, which I've always done for the biology, and doing just a little biological inoculant, just to get the nutrients that's available broken down and available for the plant. So me just using water is showing that I don't really need to add nutrients or do a feeding schedule. Like you've seen Subcool in some of his later videos was doing feeding schedule with like down to earth teas on top of his super soil. But in the beginning, he just talked about super soil and just water. Just water. That's it.
I think the tea aspect comes in the greedy nature of the grower. Every time we do have even a great product by everybody's standards, we're still in the grow rooms trying to fucking tweak out heat, CO2, something to just juice out a little bit more terpenes, trichomes. Why is that? I don't usually just coast.
Well, most of us, I believe, trying to release the genetic potential of the plant. If we can add a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that, just to help it out, we believe we're benefiting the plant. And it's not necessarily benefiting the plant every time, but if we're able to get the plant to stress out to produce secondary metabolites, that's more of what I think we're trying to do.
Yeah, Eagle, I think back to your soil question though, talking about the aeration of that, whatever mix you got, I think I would focus more on how that thing's breathing and taking water. And then I wouldn't really consider the amount of nutrients in there as being much of anything from it. It might be something to get you a couple weeks, you know what I mean? But you're gonna probably want to amend, and you're gonna probably want to have something in mind for, those that tea blend will help some, but you're still gonna want to have something built in there. I would recommend building up the calcium sources because that's probably what that soil is going to be lacking in, because they're going to dump together. And whatever compost source they use, I would roll the dice that it's probably going to be on the potassium side anyway. So throwing in some form of a calcium to balance that out, like gypsum or bone, probably a combination of multiple.
You're muted.
They claim in the bag anyway, rich blend of compost, chicken manure, kelp, and worm castings.
So not much calcium sources, really.
No.
So if you added some gypsum, some oyster shell that's longer breaking down, something like that would help give you calcium source, or even using, from according to Nick and his little secret about using some apple cider vinegar, which helps kind of release nutrients with calcium and kind of helps everything uptake. You can use a little bit of that to help release.
All right. All right.
Yeah, but that would be probably what I would think on the mix. And then, do you have any kind of thing available by you, like as far as the base? I don't know, like a BioLive. Can you find something on the? Do they have Down to Earth somewhere by you guys?
And I don't know. I mean, literally, as far as like stores, I gotta travel. I gotta travel to hit anything.
So any feed stores, like agricultural feed stores,
Yeah.
co-op
Closest thing
stores.
I'd have to a feed store would be like Tractor Trailer Supply.
So Tractor Supply, dude, you get a bag of alfalfa pellets there. It's like horse feed. That's gonna be a good all around kind of base and give you some nitrogen. You could probably find the eggshells there for the chicken feed. So that shit will have that stuff in it
So
too.
let me ask you this while you talk about the eggshells. So yeah, I eat a lot of eggs. I boil a lot of eggs. I usually boil them, chop them up, throw them in my salad. And because of the water here, I constantly buy my water. It's all fucking clean water. So from the pan, from the jug to the pan, eggs, that's it. I actually let that water cool and was watering it to my plants a little bit the other day. That boiled egg water. Any thoughts on that shit? Is there anything in there from the boiled eggs? I did boiling. It would have to get rid of any pathogen.
I mean, it gets kind of frothy, don't it, or does it stay pretty clear? I don't know.
Well, it might have some biology from the chicken's ass or wherever it came out of, but
they wash
it's
that shit, don't they?
right. But there's no like acid breaking down the calcium from the egg to the calcium carbonate. And that's why you do most of like the apple cider vinegar eggshell extraction, where you'll actually see the CO2 kind of releasing and breaking it down and helping do the extraction part of it. Where just using eggshells and water wouldn't quite do it.
I ain't wasting it. Buying that
Well,
water. I ain't
You
wasting it.
could,
well, dump it on your plants. I mean, it might have some type of enzyme or something to it, you know.
No, actually, if anything, I would. The more I think about it, it could be counterproductive because I've watched the thing on eggs actually, and they were saying like over in the European countries, you won't see fucking white beautiful eggs like we see here in the United States. You see brown dirty eggs or dirty white eggs over there because through the bleaching or the cleaning and bleaching process, the egg is porous and will take shit in through the that nasty cleaning process and the bleaching process. So they say the beneficial bacteria is on the shell, and overall the dirty egg over there is just the better way to go. So I wonder about like I said, my nice clean egg that I just boiled, if there wasn't maybe some shitty shit on the outside of them shells that may not have. Just thinking aloud.
And that's why I said, when it came out to us or whatever it came out of, a little bit of like biology out of its gut, could be left on that eggshell, just like you were describing.
Good farm fresh, bad store bought.
But if your temperature is over 200 degrees, I'm sure you're killing most of the biology at that point, because anything over 140, you're really starting to kill quite a bit of biology.
you're gonna be able to find gypsum at that farm store too, Tractor Supply. So you got
Well,
a couple sources right there. They probably will even have like a bone meal. They might even have some kind of a pre-mix type stuff like a BioLive or something too. Those Tractor
So
Supplies have a little garden section usually. So.
I got another question for you guys. Maybe you can help me with this one too. I was listening to it. I talk about this a lot on how I believe, the plants and us kind of echo each other in a lot of ways. The way they uptake shit, the way we uptake shit. So I was listening to a gentleman today talk about. I was listening to back pain, things to aid and hinder what aids and hinders, back, recovery and stuff like that, bone recovery. And one of the things they say would help, recovery was magnesium glyphosate. And of course, another thing I take
Well, do you
a
ever
lot
take?
is calcium. But this guy was saying that taking the two together would cancel each other out. So the proper way to take them was to take the magnesium and then a couple hours later take your calcium for better absorption. Now, is that a thing with the plant? Should they, you know what I mean? Should you offset the two? Because we always talk about the old CalMag, and they're usually together in the same bottle. So that's what made me go, huh, does plants, you know what I mean? Is it the same with plants? So, I mean, should there be a delay? Should there be calcium in the soil and you just be watering in the magnesium or vice versa? And talk to me.
I'm gonna let you guys take the calcium, magnesium, sulfur combo, but after that, hand that off to me for the human side of that because calcium, potassium, magnesium, vitamin D3, and vitamin K2 are all integral parts of that, as are many other pieces. So let's extend that as an extension of the plant conversation. You guys take the plant, I'll pick up on from there. If that's cool, everybody.
So, can the plant take up both at the same time? Is it beneficial for them to, the CalMag to hit them at once? I mean, obviously, we've been doing this shit for years, but
Real thing about it is like the balance that's my understanding of the balance that it's in. So a lot of times in the cow mags that you're adding, it's like a 3-to-1 or whatever, but it's not the ratio of calcium to magnesium that it should be for the plant. So that in that aspect, yeah, it can become more heavy on the magnesium side than the calcium if that ratio is too low or whatever. So, yeah, I guess that's the answer. Yeah, it can be, but no, it shouldn't be if it's in a ratio. The plant can deal with that. You know what I mean?
so how do you necessarily mix your soil into that ratio? Just knowing proper numbers.
Well, I mean, the test is going to give you a baseline of where it's at, and that's where I was saying, like, if it's high in magnesium already, you're gonna know that you're not gonna want to add that. You know what I'm saying? So, like, now you're trying to balance the potassium and the calcium to the magnesium that's already high, or vice versa. If it's high in potassium, you're trying to match the magnesium and calcium to that potassium that's already high. So it's a balance that you're trying to achieve in the soil mix versus like what's falling into solution, what's there, what biology is functioning.
So magnesium helps with like cell division, and calcium helps with like nutrient uptake. So the plant can actually take up both at the same time. Doing magnesium foliar sprays will help a little bit more with the utilization of like Epsom salts, foliar spray type deal versus the soil. Um, when we talk about like preloading our soils with calcium, well, if you're looking at what the bag has in for the ingredients and knowing like whether or not there's calcium sources in it or magnesium sources, that would probably be the first thing I would pay attention to. Because like Roots 707, for example, has a lot of different sources of like kelp meal, yucca, or perlite, things like that. That if you know what the sources are, or like what the main breakdown is of those ingredients, you'll know more if it's calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, nitrogen. Look at that first before you do anything else. Then, like Smiley's talking, because those bags are pre-mixed, they're not always going to be the same. The nutrient levels aren't always going to be the same. One might have a little bit more than another. If you're not doing testing and you're just throwing things at it, that's what a lot of us do. And so if you're throwing extra calcium at the plant, I would say that that's not a bad thing, because the plant's going to utilize the calcium no matter how much you throw at it. It's almost more important than like nitrogen or phosphorus and potassium at times, because without it, you're really not getting the plant to use be able to really uptake the nutrients, cation exchange type shit. You understand what I'm saying, Eagle?
I do.
Well, in the balance of it, like in Albrecht's method, that it's like 73% calcium. You know what I mean? So on the cation exchange site. So like, I mean, you always think of it, even if you're trying to water something in, or if you're trying to, add a top dress or something, having that kind of picture in your mind can help, And it's like, I don't know, what is it, like 9 or 10% magnesium, and it's like 6% potassium. So it's kind of a different ball game you're shooting for with soil, in my opinion, or what I understand of it, than anything else. And you can get water soluble sources for some of that too. Like, I get the micronized gypsum. I've talked about that before. I'll water that in, and you'll see a plant response from it. You can water it in too much. I can testify to that. So there's some extent to that, So
let me ask you this, Eagle. When I used to live in Villa Grove, the northern part of the San Luis Valley, Salida was 25, 30 minutes away. I didn't really have anything around me that was close. They had a grocery store there. I mean, there's a lot of people in that valley trying to find a grocery store, and they had one. But I just order stuff off of Amazon. Like down to earth stuff you can find on Amazon, different nutrients you can find on Amazon, different sources of calcium you can find on Amazon. So if you're out like bumfuck Egypt, middle of nowhere, and you have to drive half hour longer just to go somewhere, I can understand trying to use like Walmart free shipping, Amazon free shipping, something like that, or even go to like a grocery store that in one of the bigger cities that might ship it to you, and see what the shipping costs are, for smaller packages. But that would be another idea of like when I used to have to do that stuff. So I kind of understand being out in the middle of nowhere. Like my packages, if they were small enough, would be delivered to the local post office, to my mailbox, my little mailbox, PO box. Or if the packages were too big, they would just drop them off at the house.
I would definitely go that route for amendments and all the future things, but I was just more or less, we're talking with the base, starting with the media itself, a good starting point. How bad or good, the cheap stuff is for the base, if that's what you have to start with. Because now ordering soil through the mail and shit like that can be costly. You know what I mean? Have shit, it weighs. Everything ships by weight. So, and if I don't know how I'd feel about getting a nice soggy bag of soil. You know what I mean? That's.
So here's something that's kind of interesting. My buddy Tanasi, Sacred 3 Mushrooms, him and I talk about like him shipping all of his mushroom kits. And for him to ship local Colorado, it costs more to ship locally than it does across the United States to other states.
That's crazy.
I don't get that. I'm a couple hours away and it costs you $35 to ship it to me, but $10 to ship it to somebody in like Ohio.
I
It
know
doesn't
I've
make
got
sense to me.
for the price of what it would cost to ship, to be quite honest with you, I could probably ride to some, I've got fucking country roots ain't far away. Detroit nutrients isn't probably that, it would be
Mhm.
worth the drive in both, whatever directions for the cost of the shipping and just to hang out and smoke with some of the cool fuckers. But, this is, again, I had to start somewhere at this point, you know what I mean? I'm so happy to fucking get the light and the plants going.
What you
Yeah,
really, what you really should do is get a hold of Chris from Country Roots, and he'll probably even meet you somewhere or something. But
right.
they got everything that you need for setting you up. Even he's got base mix soils. He's got you know he,
Well,
he made like more heavily amended stuff and all of that.
I mean, to be honest with you, the plants, they've been in there for a week and a half. The pluckers are well happy in what they're in.
so
Indeed they
Eagle.
are. But yeah, find a local supplier. I agree on that for sure. Like support your local suppliers and help form that
Yeah.
community that builds good soils locally and keeps the whole process ongoing. That's my 2 cents.
So you're trying to start over. I have some kind of what
Yeah.
I had to do and what some people are doing now is like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. A lot of older grow equipment, people are literally just giving away,
Oh, I got
giving
grow
away.
equipment.
But,
I got grow
people,
equipment for days.
but for people that are trying to start over, or lost stuff and need to find new equipment, there are people literally giving grow equipment away in some of these states. Like I know a buddy of mine, he's got a bunch of old high pressure metal halide style lights, some old, fans, exhaust fans. And he's like, bro, you know anybody that wants them? I'll just give them away. I don't grow anymore. I don't want them. Like, so people actually are giving this stuff away that if you're trying to start over and you're trying to find some grow equipment, search this out. I mean, you might be able to pick up some good equipment just to get started with pretty inexpensively.
No. Well, yeah, no, I've still got, I lost some lights in the break in, but I still got a lot of lights. And fuck, man, I've got 72 fucking 10-gallon pots out there. I've got 72 fucking 3-gallon pots. I've got 72 1-gallon pots. I've got fucking air pots. Almost 50 of fucking the 2.5s, 50 of the tubes. The fucking
So it's not the
if
pots,
somebody
it's
wants some grow equipment, come talk to me because I'd be willing to off some shit.
Thinking that too, I got probably like 100 some pots too in the garage.
Oh man.
why do we keep buying more when we have plenty?
I don't mind buying more of those. No, not at all. But the
Dude,
soil,
at one point I doubled my saucers because that white line that would film, you know what I mean, build up when I was doing cocoa and fucking salts and shit. You'd get that wet salt ring that would build up in the fucking saucer. I would switch that motherfucker out. I'd literally just every time that fucker got dirty, I'd just swap another right under there. That's how anally clean I've been with my grow rooms at some point. It's just cleanliness is a thing, you know what I mean? And yeah, fuck that shit. Yeah, so yeah. Why do we do it? Sometimes it's just simplicity, you know. Then at one points, like say the 10 gallons, I've went up saucer sizes from different feeding methods. Do you know what I mean? To bottom feeding in a bigger saucer, to just the 10%, just enough runoff, catch it just enough runoff to tell me to stop. You know what I mean? And that be the bare minimum I need. But if I've got the room to separate the pots, I prefer a much bigger saucer to catch some shit. You know what I mean? But yeah, why do we keep doing that? I just think to keep upping our game. Same reason why we keep trying to fucking tweak our recipes for the plant. It's just up, isn't it? I mean,
And the other side of this all too is we're talking about amending a soil, but really what functionally cycles that nutrient is the biology in the soil. So you still have to really, bring in a good biocomplete type of a compost to try to get a good soil food web established and going. So like a good compost source. I mean,
Wait a
Chris
minute, wait a minute.
probably closest to you, but
But if
where
we're about
you're
to
gonna spend your money is what I'm saying.
bring Chris Trump on, why aren't we talking about like doing IMOs and trying to get stuff from, local areas like or indigenous organisms that are locally? I
Because
mean,
that's what Chris is
Hey,
gonna talk about.
yeah, we
oh,
gotta save those questions and stuff for him. Yeah, that was a little mix up on time between us there. So he is gonna be here in about 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. We're trying, yeah, saving those questions and all that good stuff. But it would have probably been a good build up.
that's what I was trying to do. Trying to build
So,
up so we can start getting that conversation rolling.
but in all fairness, things do happen. I mean, I had problems the last time. We could have had a mix up this week, and then we would have had a build up of K and F talk that we would have had to swim through the rest of the show instead of saving that for our guests. That's just my thought on that medically, but I got questions. I don't have answers, and here's our guest. So this is the guy.
You see how I led into that now?
Perfect.
It's called a segue, I know or something.
Nice segue. Ah, yes, yes, yes. This will be fun. I've been trying to bone up a little bit on my KNF throughout the day and whatnot. So this should be a good one. I wish we could have caught some of the last conversation y'all had with Mr. Trump, because definitely some
So
information drops that the other day.
So, for all of you that don't quite understand what happened, we had technical difficulties and Eagle just couldn't get connected. But we still had a really good conversation going with Chris in the background, and nobody thought to record or try to remember most of it. And so we're all like, oh, we wanted to try to share some of that somehow with you guys. And luckily, Chris was able to come back on and
We're blessed that he was able to give us another night. Thank you, Mr. Trump, for joining us. How are you tonight?
I am great, and so sorry that I got the time wrong. I was in last week. I just wanted to go back there. We had so much fun.
Well, blessed to have you, that's for sure. What have you been up to? I mean, since the last time we talked. I mean, other than last week, it's been long time since me and you have spoken. What's been up with you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I continue to work and adventure with my kids. I got 5 kids, and yeah, went and saw the new Dune last week. That was fun, and I've been teaching in different places in the world. Right now, I am in Hawaii. I'm planting some ginger with the hopes of doing that as my main kind of work, moving away from traveling and teaching as much. Yeah, I've been working with some cool farms. There's avocado farm down in Southern California that's drop ships their avocados, and they're doing a whole compost tea liquid IMO installation, and that was really neat to see and help them with. And yeah, I'll be going back to Ireland in June, end of June. But yeah, I think also just really craving the simplicity of farming, the world of running around was is really important, and I've loved it. but I want to be more selective and kind of be able to have my hands in the dirt more. It feels more connective to teach from that place. So I'm itching back there.
Beautiful green background behind you, almost
Yeah.
neon. It's so healthy.
Let's see if I can show you a little better. It's a very gray day. Let's see if this will let me adjust. Maybe not. But yeah, there's sheep out in the pasture there, the little white specks. And the rows are ulu trees or breadfruit. And then in the background, there's little rows. I don't know. I can't zoom in. It's not letting me. There it goes. All right. So yeah. Oh well. Technical ineptness.
Beautiful and
Yeah,
awesome, dude. Awesome.
there you go. That's what's outside right now.
Oh, no. I was just saying yours is awesome. This is just a background because I have a crappy background for real here. So awesome.
Got it.
Great to have you on. Just wanted to welcome you and say your farm looks awesome. I'm going to mute back out now.
So, Chris, the last conversation that we were having and discussing, I don't know how much of it you remember or
Yeah.
not. Can we kind of talk about some of that conversation, parts that you remember?
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
it was a really good conversation we were starting to have. Bunch of different topics we kind of touched on. One of them was like FFJ, FPJ, what to use, what not to use. What were some of the other discussions, Smiley? Do you remember? Because I know you were.
I'm bad at that, man. I don't remember at all. No.
I gave you guys a tidbit. Do you remember the bit for exploration? We were talking
The
about.
oxygen in the root zone.
Mm-hmm. We have fun talking about that.
I remember that conversation.
Yeah, I can jump into any of those. FPJ and FFJ is pretty simple, and it's something I've talked about, or I try to talk about once in a while, just because it's so often wrong in the interweb. First thing, I guess, is a couple misnomers on using fermented plants. One, you're not going to get the flavor of anything you apply transferring into your strain. You're not going to be smoking that and getting this like papaya note, because you used papaya. So I have heard that as a technique for flavoring, and that is that's not true. False. The other is FJ is really good for ripening your fruit. Enzymatic profile of that completely different from FPJ. So an FPJ can be a fruit, but it would be a fruit in its green stage or prior to sugar development stage. So that would be considered an FPJ. And those have a lot of plant growth hormone and the enzymatic profile pushing production, yield, and just general food for plants and microbes, chock full of the beneficial biochemicals for kind of what typically we want to see happen in plants as we feed them these things. FJ has this whole finishing off enzymatic profile, so it is promoting ripening. So if we're talking, I want my oil glands to turn red and rosy, like I want to get into ripening or move in that direction, FFJ is going to do that. And so if you're applying it early, you might be sending mixed signals to your plant, and you'll lose energy and lose potential yield because of that. That is something that people that use FFJ, they haven't played with, because they're just like, I use FFJ, that's how I learned. And people that use FPJ, you know, maybe they're just getting a little better results than the FFJ people, but no one ever knows because they're not side by side trialing it.
So I'm sure you hear that quite a bit in this industry of like people trying it out and they're not getting the results, and so they get frustrated with even trying FFJs or FPJs or anything of the sort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to do what works for you. So if you try something and it doesn't work, you're probably, not gonna. But yeah, doing it wrong because there's misnomers on the internet is kind of sad. And FPJ is not a balanced nutrient. The key in natural farming is working with balanced nutrients, and FPJ by itself isn't. So you want to at least, if a bare minimum, use it with the same ratio of vinegar. So living vinegar is best. Rice vinegar is even better, just better nutrients for feeding foliarly. But yeah, so equal with vinegar, and you won't get pest problems or disease problems because from applying an imbalanced or too sweet nutrient. So never by itself. And there's, yeah, that's might be kind of weird or challenging to understand for people that are already playing with it, but it will affect things. Maybe things you're not even attributing it to can go a little wonky with the wrong nutrient at the wrong time or in the wrong way.
So in some of these FPJs and FFJs that we create, what kind of hormones, enzymes are really in them? And how are they affecting our plants?
It was a great question. I have a partial answer for you. There's so auxins is like an umbrella term of plant growth hormones, general plant hormones, but it's kind of like saying cannabinoids. Okay, so in there's this huge, massive potential expression in different plants, and so I don't know specifically which is in what plant that you're making. And you'd have to do analysis for that, just like you'd send away labs for cannabis. But as a general concept, we all know that kelp is great for farming, right? Why is kelp great for farming?
The 70 macronutrients that are available in it?
That's because it's an ocean plant, yeah. So chocked full of mineral from growing in the ocean. Another reason is it is the fastest growing plant in nature. And so the growth hormones in kelp, the beneficial biochemicals positively affect our plant or are ready and good food for our growing system. So what we do with FPJ is we identify, you can definitely use, I sell kelp-based FPJ on my website. You can definitely use kelp to make FPJ, but a lot of our FPJ, we use land-based, high growth potential plants. So we use the plants that grow like crazy. You can't kill them with a brick. They never get bugs or disease. They're just that hardy thing because that plant is two things. One, really good at taking up nutrients in its environment. So it's going to be loaded because it's always healthy, right? So it's not a anemic plant. In that environment, it's doing a good job transmuting that soil into plant tissue. And another thing is it's probably chocked full of um, beneficial biochemicals or a fuller genetic, fuller expression, because it's able, by not getting bugs, it's probably producing complete proteins in its cell wall by fats and proteins that are hard for bugs to eat through. So it's not getting messed with because it's a healthy plant. And then that vigorous growing, and we want the new shoots, or that initial growth stage, that next growth stage that's gonna pop off, because that's where it's loading its nutrients and its hormones to push and grow that next stage of the plant. So we're taking something that has a similar effect on microbes as food and plants as a nutrient as kelp, but we're doing it from the land. But same principle applies. Same reason that we see nature responding to these things like kelp so well is because it's with kelp where it's grown, so in the ocean. Part of why we use some sea mineral in natural farming, because that is actually important in all this. But yeah, so FPJ, and then the young fruit, baby fruit, packed full of growth hormone, getting ready. But then once it goes into sugar, it's basically we've used up all that pushed energy to get there, and now we're turning it into glucose. Turning it into the various sugars that now there's still a ton of great nutrients in there, but it's not the same plant growth nutrient. It's like compost feed your soil nutrient. Little different, little change.
So in the case of the like kelp, and well, in any input of the process there, how important is, like, say, the freshness? I mean, you talked about the location, the best place to harvest from the kelp, but I mean, should it be, harvested? Should it be fresh, wet? I mean, dried? I mean, how important is that both in kelp or even in the fruit you're fermenting?
Yeah, if you're going to jump into fermentation, I highly recommend you're using fresh plants. And so kelp, you're not going to probably scuba dive to get it. So maybe the next best thing would be as the tide goes out. So tide's coming in, bring in the kelp, and then walk out with the tide, harvest your kelp. You want it super fresh, you can pick it off the waves as it comes in. You don't need to rinse it, and you can ferment it like that. But yeah, it's it should be fresh or hold on.
Well, it made me ask because if I was just thinking about the beneficials, like Medically Fit was talking about there, that the minerals and stuff like that come from the kelp. But when you talk about growth hormones and stuff like that, it really seems like the freshness really matters.
Yeah, I don't know how well that transfers in a dried product. I don't know. I know that dried kelp is still an amazing farm amendment, but FPJ is so preserved. I mean, so little is being done. It's not being cooked. Things aren't changing very much from its original state. In fermentation, there's just a tiny bit of alcohol production that kind of compromises cell walls and allows some kind of bleeding through of the plants into water soluble form. But other than that, it's really unaffected. And so I think that's it is important for it to be fresh. So in natural farming, we harvest it before or first light. And that's because the accumulation of all the work of the day before is moved around, sorted, and pushed into that growing tip over the night. It uses the accumulated nutrient, creates what it needs to produce new growth in its plant, and then by morning it's pushed that all into its growing tips. And so it's fresh, just like it woke up, had its first cup of coffee, getting ready for the day, rather than tired, I worked all day, I'm out of juice. We're kind of getting that accumulation that the plant naturally does and its growing tips. We're taking advantage of that by harvesting it in the morning. But with kelp,
So
it's harder to do.
now, Chris, I've always kind of heard that the reason also in the morning is because the biology that's on the plant, and that's more what you're looking for. Like through the day, there's not as much biology on it. And so, like you're talking that first morning is the better time for that.
Well, there is typically dew and a lot of its own biology on the plant in the morning, so that is true. But and we use its life to ferment itself. So that being active is really helpful to ferment its own tissue. But we're not using FPJ for our microbes. That's not where microbes come from in natural farming. So FPJ is plant food. Now you might benefit from some of those yeasts and bacteria that are on that tissue of that plant, but it's not the answer you're looking for as far as microbial life.
So, what kind of microbial life are we really looking for when we're doing these ferments and feeding our plants these nutrients? What are we hoping to really get out of them? Is it like more of a bacteria, fungi?
Yeah, so all our liquid nutrients like that are not our source of microbes. We get it from IMO. So this 1 through 4 stage of IMO is the key. It's like 80% of natural farming and the benefit comes from these microbes that you can cultivate. And the more wild crafted or diverse you can get, the better it is in a living soil system. Now, if you're doing synganics, we can talk about it. Maybe you're less concerned about maximum diversity because it's going to fall off all the time. You just want something that'll convert some of your nutrients. That could be maybe a different need because you don't necessarily need to maximize diversity in a cocoa scenario. You can just use some powerful things that'll keep you healthy, but you lose some of the benefit.
So this is yes, because this is kind of leads into some of the conversation we talked about before about like the biodiversity of why, in living soil we use different cover crops and the genetic diversity that the plants that we're looking to get the expression out of. And that's some of the conversation we had in the background last time. And
yeah,
can you kind of talk about what you've seen over the years and, like some of these principles that people are now looking at and like genetic diversity?
Yeah. So I don't know how many does anybody know what they say the identified biochemicals of cannabis are up to? And they keep increasing and they find another cannabinoid. We like
700, I thought total like active compounds.
Wow.
But that's yeah, 600 to 700 active compounds and like 100 and I think 50 are maybe identified now. I think that's what Ethan Russo or Dr. Deddy Miri talked about.
150 what?
Different cannabinoids and anandamides, compounds that aren't quite named yet have been found and kind of identified.
So the cool thing with the cannabis industry, something I love about it, is that they're the testing is part of the industry. And so as people are playing with changes, as people are having a new round, each batch being a unique experiment potentially, you're getting results like automatic. Like no matter what, you're gonna have results on that whole thing, each time. And so the reason I think natural farming became has grown and really gone viral on cannabis is worldwide is because the expression of the plant is greater. Your genetic potential, the cannabinoids in a living soil system with root zone relationships, they're expressing a far greater entourage effect, where they're in balance to each other, or in ratio to each other in a totally different way than they're getting in salts. That doesn't mean that a salt grower couldn't push diverse minerals and get a ton of different things to express, but the testing and the kind of winning of many cups and competitions around flavor, because you're and this is, some of that kind of stuff gets really subjective, but the science of the genetic expression happening or not happening isn't really subjective. It's quite literally numbers on a page, and so, but the expression of more or less cannabinoids and these different compounds directly associates with flavor, affect all of it, because the complex sugars in, say, a strawberry that we associate with flavor, these are your biochemicals. If they don't have the nutrients they need in their growing phase, they're not able to put together those compounds. And they don't need just big nutrients, they need the diverse nutrients.
So are we talking like flavonoids, terpenoids type compounds with like needing the trace macro minerals to get some of those expressions that you're discussing?
And so the theory there, or what we understand is happening, is that the plant with root relationships is in a living soil system where there's sand, silt, and clay, stones to, eat on and break apart. You got basalt in there. Now you have all these minerals. Your plant can show through a biochemical communication a deficiency or a need in its exudate. The sugar that's coming out could be better. We need to give it it's almost like the microbes are running the plant like a recipe. Add a little more salt, you get the right flavor in our sugars, the right food for our giant community of bacteria, and so they bring more of the needed mineral. And the plant's doing the same. It needs a mineral, it's putting out, sending a biochemical signal for response to get more boron or zinc sent over into its rhizophyte. So the plants then going to use that to produce these more complex chains or types of biochemicals. And in cannabis, were cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids, but a lot of plants have their own biochemical. But quick example I gave, I think the other week when we were chatting about it, is the flavorless strawberry from Costco. Okay, hydro grown, big, beautiful, juicy, not worth eating, totally flavorless. It's also not making you healthy because it's nutrients, right? The flavors, it goes together, it's all part of it. And so then the grandma's garden strawberry that's little and ugly, you pick it out of the ground, it's living soil, and you eat it, and it's like the explosion of flavor. The flavor is as big as two of those giant strawberries, right? And that's that plant expressing what it potentially can with access to on-demand minor minerals. And so cannabis does the same thing, and you have the effect, being, instead of peaky THC, we're spread out with a bunch of different things affecting you all at the same time. in flavor. It's just that strawberry, that flavorless, lacking the complexity that we would associate with flavor, the smell, the aroma, all of it. So this is food and medicine across the board. Living soil, that complex interaction really gives the plant the potential to express, what it potentially could. It gives it the access to the mineral to express its full genetic potential.
So you mentioned something about organics and some of kind of the growing method and what happens when. Can you explain that a little bit more now? Kind of like with, because I've seen, like, one of my good friends, is his name is NV Closet Med Grower. He's won some awards doing organics with his flower, and he's still getting some of the profiles and expressions out of it. But can you kind of explain to some people like what it is and what it does from your understanding?
Yeah. And problem is it's diverse, right? Where are we talking about? If the indoor, scope is, one's, 3 foot deep, 4 foot wide living soil beds, with a whole horizontal system and everything alive in it, living soil, don't need to change it for 10 years, to I just put some vermiculite and cocoa in a 1 gallon pot, and all their nutrients get fed to them through a SIP system, or I don't know how far we go there, but or hydro. Um, in that range, you could have a whole bunch of different amounts of life. This being some of the most diverse soil you ever see, to halfway in between, you have soil, but you just bought potting soil, you bought potting soil, and now you want to make it alive, and
Eagle, listen up. He's talking to you.
and so, can that be done? Well, it can't, it won't necessarily be done in a small pot, tiny pot. You're going to have you'll never get to like critical mass of a whole functioning system. But in a giant 10-gallon pot, could you make it alive over time with top dressing compost and worms getting going and everything? Yeah, you could get a pretty, but now you're also putting salt nutrients in there, or whatever. And so now some of the worms die, it becomes, pH gets wonky for a minute, and you have these fluctuations in the microbial community that some things just won't survive. So even though you've inoculated maybe with a really great thing, those fluctuations from the way the newts are and just the kind of caustic nature, the kind of poisonous to the touch nature that imbalance is to some organisms, so you'll have this constant die-off of microbes. But what you can get by putting microbes in a salt nutrient system is you can get really amazing conversion rates, where instead of hopefully getting 20% of those nutrients up to uptake, or 30% to uptake, that's a hopeful thing, you're now getting 100%, or you're getting really amazing plant expression from less nutrients, so it's making them available, because they did research in hydroponics. They're bleaching the system, sterilizing everything. They put all the sterilized plants, sterilized like clean water, everything, and they start running their pink and their blue, green, or whatever they're running.
Sounds like Bruce Bugsby.
Yeah, well, they do that, and so in the lab they were testing, where does the life come in, because this gets inoculated so quickly with these bacteria. When does it start? Where is it coming from? They're analyzing it day one, minute one, minute. Their roots are covered in LAB, that the place where the nutrients are going to be taken up requires some level of life to even be absorbed by the plants. There is a conversion that happens even in a hydro, totally bleached system. So there is no microbe void growing. Their microbes are necessary for that biological organism that is a plant to eat. Now, what level of microbes are you at? How can you create an environment? What's living, what's not? You just got to be honest with yourself. You can't say I'm a bio grower and then you've never really realized because you never looked at it under a microscope. There's nothing in there. That combination of nutrients that you add won't allow anything to persist. And so you have little bits of bacteria that are, living on the roots and helping to convert nutrients, but you have very little else. Maybe you can with limited or highly dilute, inputs, you can do a semi-living system, and you're just putting on the same things. But I think a lot of things get off into a little bit gimmicky. We're like, it says that this has this much mycorrhiza in it, and I put it on once a week, so I'm, growing with mycorrhiza, and it's like, not necessarily. That's not necessarily what's going on in there. I've been to Living Soil Grows and scoped their soil, and they say living soil because they add two bugs in the jug. They add two products that say they have life in them.
So you've done work with Dr. Elaine Ingham. So this kind of talk a little bit about that and like what you've learned, like with living soil and with your studies of your background and how you kind of took them both and like what you're doing now with the farming.
Yeah. 2012, I think, Dr. Ingham came out to Kohala and I learned microscopy. So I didn't go to school where she was teaching. I learned a tool for my farm, how to make analysis and train your eye using the microscope as a tool. I learned how to use a microscope and make identifications over the next 10 years of practice use in the field. So on my farm, I'm making biologicals, I'm checking my work, I'm doing side-by-side trials to see how I can scale it. So that was a huge piece of the puzzle for me to be able to not just think, oh, I think I did really well, but how did I do? And that then seeing, oh, wow, that's total failure. What happened? Oh, that's what happened. But being able to go down that line of troubleshooting microscopy was amazing and has been an amazing tool. And now I use it. But I also realized that with common use things like IMO, smell, temperature, I know what that looks like under the microscope as soon as I smell or see it, or, like we don't have, it took the guesswork out, but now we can, we know what that is based on smell, based on appearance, based on how it's performing. And so that's been pretty cool, just to be able to basically train these amazing natural senses to, be able to identify what's going on. And my teacher in Korea was like that. Master Cho he knew what was going on. Then you check and you go and you're like, oh, wow, that's actually what's happening, And so it was just time and experience, just like anything, it's skill-based agriculture. Yeah, I love using biolabs for hobby growers and commercial growers yes, we can look at it I can look at it under a microscope and tell you what's what, but I tell them to send away labs because they get this beautiful printout and they'll count. And so microscopy labs, what they're doing when you're sending them a sample is they're doing these random counting throughout the slide, and they're doing it over and over and over again, getting an average. and putting that down. Ideally, I mean, maybe if they're doing it right. And so you have this really kind of it's not it's objective, this objective counting of your materials, and that's a great thing. And it costs about 110 bucks, maybe not even that, 60 to 100 bucks to send away a lab like that. So if somebody's got their living soil system or their Syngantics and they want to know how much life do I actually have, pay for $100 test or $80 test, and you can get a readout. Now, the problem is, I always tell people send 2 samples of the very same thing, because there's huge variability even in a great lab. And it doesn't matter which lab or who's doing it. If you send multiple samples, because they're still just randomly going around a slide, you know, and this is where if you randomly searched around California to see what life is like in California, and you picked 6 places, you picked 20 places, and you got an interesting pick, you'd be a little off on what life actually looks like, right? You wouldn't have the whole picture. And so that's kind of how it works. Yeah, for me, it allowed me to figure out how to produce something highly fungal. And it was all food source, or by and large food source. I learned to make IMO with wheat mill run. I did some side-by-side trials after I got going, only to realize that wheat mill run is a terrible substrate for growing fungi, because it has no fats or proteins, or almost none. It's all sugars. So it's great bacterial food. If you're a bokashi person, great material. But for actually producing fungi, I didn't have the necessary sustenance to create a good swath of it. So I learned that by doing side-by-side trials with a microscope over and over again. And so it's been an incredible part of the journey, but also over 14 years of doing this, I am pretty convinced I can smell it and tell you what's going on most of the time now. It's just going back and forth, looking at it, smelling it, and analyzing it. But we also learn about specific species through microscopy, which is huge, because we're starting to understand more and more. Matt Powers is doing great work.
I was getting ready to bring his name up. Talk about that, because we talked about Matt last time a little bit, and what you've kind of been doing with him and some of the work. Can you kind of tell some of that what's been happening, and like the microscopy part of like what Matt's doing? And
we did a lot of work in the last 15 years identifying microbes, and we putting them in classifications, and then we change them and unlearn, like actinobacteria, actinomyces were all a classification of fungi. When we first saw them, we just called them a fungi because they look kind of like a fungi, even though they're a monofilament wire. They're really, really thin. But now they're a bacteria, and those kind of changes have been happening. But what beyond that, I guess what Matt's been digging into is how we're doing these analysis, these different ways that we can test and identify species, only to then have the species in the same sample change its expression or how it shows up in the same test. And the questions are abundant, is it adapting? But one of the things that has been identified is horizontal gene transfer within species. The changing of its DNA for adaptability, for reasons unknown, that these microbes are taking a piece of that or the food that they're consuming, the environment they're in, and then reconfiguring a bit to move on in their process. And that's messing with pests galore, because we're seeing morphlings, if you will. But that being kind of just a common thing in the microbiological world is kind of what Matt's seen or we're talking about understanding. And so I get to do a lot of things in a lot of different places and look at it under a microscope and passively learning to just see how things are different and express different. We've gotten to do some gene mapping with a project, a friend of mine in New York, and the data is immense, but huge amounts of diversity in 3 different IMO samples from different places in the US, and the gene mapping of those. And yeah, it's been a lot of kind of learning as a community, all this stuff we're playing with, and there's a lot more to learn. It's really beautiful in its vastness and complexity. Matt has a great book out on his findings. Microscopy by Matt Powers. There's another 2 words that go with it. I am a terrible friend. I did not remember the name of his book. But he's so such a diligent and capable writer. And so he's just he's putting a lot in there. So it's worth a read. Yeah, but I think one of the things that I would just encourage, and I want to circle back to this synganics conversation, the principles that exist in nature, and that's the why things happen on a little bit, not looking down through a microscope, but on a little bit more macro level. Why are we considering this anaerobic? Why is this aerobic? What are the principles that create these scenarios, and how does that affect the outcome or what's in it? An aerobic compost will never show as high in nutrients with the exact same material, even if you kept it from going over temperature, all the things with the same substrate grown up, compost made aerobically or anaerobically. If you send it away to a fertilizer analysis, the aerobic compost will never show up as high in nutrients as the anaerobic compost ever.
Does that time span matter from when you send off the tests?
I mean, yeah, aerobic compost can go to crap in a plastic bag, absolutely. But I'm saying on a nutrient only level, not microbes, not analyzing what is alive in there, just on a newt level. Like if you're pulling up your bag and you're looking for the readout percent XYZ, nutrients in here, that a anaerobic compost will show much more. And it's because the anaerobes, these small bacteria, they can't break down these complex these molecules that test as nutrients, as fertilizer. They can't break them down to anything but what they are. And so they're all there, present, untouched, to show up on your fertilizer analysis. But aerobic microbes can reconfigure many of those nutrients that we're looking for in fertilizer and move them around or break them apart in their bodies, in that space. And so they're base components that then need to be reconfigured by a plant in uptake or by microbes in transfer. And those so our fertilizer analysis won't hit any of them. Same thing's present in both. It's just not testable in the same way because of how aerobic microbes move it around in their bodies and how they process those nutrients. So that's a principle. That's a fact of nature that a lot of people don't understand. So now is compost not as good because it doesn't show up as high in NPK value? No, if you have living soil and you're top dressing, you're feeding microbes that they transmute that for your plants. you're getting all those things still. It's just that it moves or it looks different on the fertilizer analysis. We just don't have the tools to look at this all in the same way. But if there's a process where you put it all through a Kelvin torch and you can see what exactly is it in it down to its components, and there you'd find very similar things if you use the same substrate.
So is that kind of the same concept that I've kind of understood over the years, that the biology, like bacteria and fungi, kind of store it in their bodies until they're dead or eaten, through the rhizophagy cycle type deal? And is that why they're testing higher in these nutrients?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, okay. So
And
the aerobic, where more oxygen is happening, that's not happening because they're being broke down a little faster and it's not staying in the bodies of these.
no,
The
you just
biology.
described the aerobic process in that first process. The
Yeah.
anaerobic process, they're chunking at it. It's almost like they're mining crystals. They're not eating the crystals, and so all the crystals are still there. They're chunking away. They're pulling all it out. They're breaking it all down, but they can't do anything with that. So when I look, how many crystals are there's tons of them. But in the aerobic process, they're like num 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 base minerals. And so then they're passing through. Or okay, in humans, for example, if I eat something rich in vitamin A, in my body, that vitamin A molecule will get deconstructed in digestion. Some will be stored in my kidney, some will be stored in my liver. And when I need vitamin A, my body will pull those parts and push it into the block hole that I need filled at that time. Does that make sense? So in the microbiological world, it happens similarly. And so it's hard to analyze something that's been deconstructed when we're looking for the vitamin A, but now it's both its raw components or where it's stored. Half is over here, half is over there.
One thing you guys were talking about last time that I found very interesting, but couldn't really chime in on, was kind of gaseous pressures, both trying to add oxygen to the roots and then basically pressurizing a room for, pushing the plant that way too. I thought that what you guys were talking about there was super interesting.
Yeah. So what was some of this stuff you were doing research wise, Chris, that we were talking about with that?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I was not this is not a research. You guys were talking, we got into conversation, and what came up was that all these wild things, people are like, I think if I do this thing with poles and electrify my water,
electroculture, and things like that.
Yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, really, there's so little known about so many of these things. I think there's some people that figure it out and they get it right, but then the copy is just, don't even bother. It's not real. But I said one thing: if you wanna mess with something that to get wild results, is mess with creating a hyperbaric chamber, or pressurizing gases to your plant, pressurizing your growing system. Because in my fascination as a kid and growing up learning about things, one of the factoids I came away with was that all fossilized amber, when they find it, all of the air bubbles are double the air pressure, all of them, completely, like across the board. So they bore into it and then they analyze what they're finding, right? And so beyond a certain age, they're all double the air pressure. So what was that? Why is that principle important? Well, we see it in nature. We put somebody that's hurt themselves in a hyperbaric chamber. Their blood becomes oxygen saturated. Oxygen saturated blood deals with all amino acids, build up, and we have healing. Inflammation goes away. And so if we were living in that environment, we could run without getting tired. We stay oxygen saturated. Not that you can't get tired, but it's not in the same way. You don't get that sore muscle tired in the same way because of the oxygen moving away the waste so effectively. But plants don't just use oxygen; they also use the carbon dioxide and the environment being pressurized. Pot and all. Now the movement of oxygen into your soil is greater. The way all of this rhizophagy, living soil we're talking about, all of this is based on moving things using oxygen and their various gases. This is all tied into photosynthesis. And so one of the projects I saw was this Japanese scientist with a terrarium where they were pressurizing the room. They were pressurizing carbon dioxide, I think, to the canopy. And anyways, he had a cherry tomato variety, and he had it. It was 20 something feet tall in this terrarium with these big old tomatoes. And it was pretty incredible. So I think even low tech pressurization and forcing of the gases could be pretty amazing if you want to learn something about how the world works in hyperbaric chamber.
What struck that chord about that with me is in one of my grow rooms there, I had a floor drain in that room. And for most of the grow period, or the period I was growing in that area, that drain had been covered. And I didn't necessarily notice any difference in my plants at that point. At one point, I decided I was gonna, for cleaning purposes, get rid of the fatigue mat I had all over the floor and uncovered that drain. And when I uncovered that drain, there was, and I can't tell you exactly what gases were coming out of that drain, but it completely changed the terpene profile, the flavor profile of the plants in that room, which initially made me think someday will they be pressurizing rooms with gas recipes for in particular flavors and terpenes? Will it actually, they know, get that far to where, well, we want this flavor profiling these terpenes, we need to add this much sulfur, you know what I mean, just a sweet spot. So when you mentioned that, I was like, they're actually doing it. No, they're way ahead of it. They're already working on it. That's awesome.
Super cool. Yeah, I wonder what exactly was happening, and that's I think a really really worth it realm to explore. You want to explore some out there stuff. You want to get into electrified rods in your backyard or something. Try pressurizing your growth scenario first. And I mean, what percentage of air is nitrogen? It's falling out of my head, but it's over 50% nitrogen, somewhere around there.
I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head.
It's like 80% nitrogen.
What?
It's like 70, 76
Yeah.
or something.
78.
So, what is the effect of pressurized nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen to a plant? Do you need to fertilize?
Not at all. Not at that point. I mean, that's kind of like electroculture talking about atmospheric energy, and most of it occurs during lightning storms is when most of that energy is available. And that's kind of like Nikola Tesla doing his Tesla tower and putting light bulbs in the ground and pushing that energy into the ground to light them up. I mean, that's the same concept in theory of what electroculture is in gardening.
Hey, can we just relate that for a sec? Because those pieces all tie together. I mean, what we're really creating in a plant or an electrical pathway is an ion pathway for electrical energy flow. It's an ion pathway. And when we connect the ground and the air, we get a tremendous flow. And that's what all of Nikola Tesla's electrical technology was based on. And that's how his wireless energy system worked. So just 2 cents on that thought.
I don't know a whole lot about the electrification of things. But I did do some research on doubling the gases, and I do think that sending doubling the gases and then turning it into a lightning storm would probably be really great. Add some rain in there. But yeah, we're just copying nature. The most amazing discoveries are us just decoding or unpacking something that was previously hidden to us, and that nature's does every day, and it's pretty incredible. So I think that gratitude for this place we find ourselves is where we all come back to.
We had a question in chat about your microscope. Which do you prefer, Matt's technique or Lane's technique when you're looking through the microscope?
I don't do. I don't. I don't think that it's that simple. I don't think there's a Matt's technique or a Lane's technique. Microscopy is like plant identification. So you're walking through a forest with a plant ID person, and they're like, "That's burdock. That's this fungi. That's that tree." That takes time to memorize by visual cues of its various expressions or genetic markers to be able to see. And so that's really microscopy is a analysis of what's there. What Matt's doing, what we talked about, is he's getting into DNA analysis and species identification through some of the testings we have available. And so it's more uncovering our inconsistencies or inaccuracies in ID that Matt's kind of touching on, that we need to re-look at how we're IDing some of these microbes and good, bad, or otherwise. Yeah, but it isn't, they don't have a different technique of looking at what it is and naming it necessarily. So I don't count typically. I just get a sense based on a lot of experience of what we're looking at, how much is there, what's not there, what is there. There's a lot of markers or like if I'm looking at compost tea and I drop the sample down and it's full of ciliates running all around, I'm like, hey, tell me what happened. Oh, the power went off for 2 hours and we had no air. I'm like, okay, that we lost our potential for a big aerobic thing. Our aerobic guys that were growing for that first 24 hours before the power went out all just kind of collapsed. And now we have this highly anaerobic, weird moonscape of microbes, But what I'm seeing is a indicator of the environmental conditions or the process and its implications on what grew. And so if we have a bunch of anaerobic guys, then what we know is we had conditions that fostered anaerobic growth. And that might be the food, that might be any number of things. So good question. And sorry, it was not a simple answer. And also, I don't ascribe to the there's conflict in the regenerative world. People like to toss me and Elaine in some sort of conflict pit, and I don't think it's like that. I've sat down and had a glass of wine with Elaine and talked through all kinds of wonderful things, and she would like our farm to be featured on our website as successful regenerative agriculture. She had told me that multiple times, and so it's all just ways of getting there. Um, yeah, microscopy is pretty much like an ID journey. You're walking through the forest, IDing everything you see, and then one of the ways you can do that is by counting biomass total of what you see and comparing the biomass total. So we have, 11 micrograms of fungi and 8 micrograms of bacteria. Now we have a comparison on how much total biomass there is, and that's where we get these fungal to bacterial ratios. They're counting actual weight, visually counting weight of these organisms.
So I've got a question, Chris.
Mhm.
You know who Gabe Brown is in the industry.
Mhm.
Would you like to go to like his farm and do some IMO work and pull it from his farm, or actually do it from your backyard?
Some IMO work? What are you asking?
Yeah. Like, would you like to go get some of the microbes off of his land with all the biomass and the biodiversity he's got going? Or would
Do
you
I live
rather?
within an hour of them, or do I live across the country?
Well, you know what I'm saying? Like, because some people think that if they get microorganisms from different places, it's more beneficial than their own backyard.
Hell
And
yeah.
so, and
Your
so,
backyard has almost nothing typically. They scraped all the topsoil, they put back fill, and then they built your house, and they were throwing the cement around and everything. It might have been in the 70s, but it still happened. And so unless somebody brought some life back there through bringing diverse collections or something, it's basically the same as it was in the 70s. I was just telling this story. I was up, I have a favorite place to go collect IMO here in Kohala, in my hometown in Hawaii. And I had this really surreal run-in. I was up there with one of my employees, and we were going to put out some IMO1 collection boxes. And I ran into an extension agent from University of Hawaii that I knew. I knew him, and so we said hi, and he introduced me to this doctor that he was transporting around. This guy had done his PhD, some of his PhD work in this region where we were collecting our IMO, and so Hawaii was in sugarcane in the 70s and earlier. And this region where we were standing, there was a fence just uphill from us, and that fence uphill had never been in sugarcane or commercial ag. That fence downhill had been in sugarcane. Sugarcane was a pretty gnarly practice where they put a lot of, just bad. It was before there was much regulation on what chemicals were used. It was some gnarly stuff that went all over Hawaii. And so his research project was analyzing the microbial diversity uphill from the fence, so 100 feet difference. Downhill slope, same hill. Your property probably has 100 feet, going across it from one edge of that to the other. Downhill, there was the equivalent of like 1,000 unique species. Uphill, 100 million unique species, 100 feet away. 50 years later. So when people are like, oh, I got it out of my compost bin in my backyard because I saw some fuzz in there. It's like, okay, remember this story, this idea that you have that I see something alive, so I'm getting life and diversity. Diversity is the key to the whole thing. You want to unlock the door to living soil system, preventing disease and bugs and all of this. Diversity is the key that unlocks the door. And so what I was doing, I didn't know any of this. I just looked around for visible life and went all over the place. And we went over the fence to this old growth ohia area, and we did our IMO collection. So ohia is a native tree here in Hawaii, special tree. And so we were just going there because that's where we found the good stuff. And so the reality of a need to, if you want a real system that has true nutrient cycling potential, like really is going to turn this compost and stuff you do into plant food and really give your plant everything it needs to be healthy and expressive. Real diversity is different from pretend diversity. And so when we have 3 microbes in a little jug that we put in, like that does something. I'm not knocking it. And I want to go back to Synganics. I'm also not knocking chemical fertilizer. Like people that need to produce food, some need to use the system they've been given and they don't know another way to be profitable. Like I have nothing but love for the hard work that it is to farm at all. And so, I'm not up here knocking. And the people that are growing their weed with, whatever they learned from the person they learned it from, do it. If you're good at it, more power to you. I'm definitely not poo-pooing your efforts. I don't want it to come off like that, but I will. We do want to call a spade, or we want to be honest with ourselves on what we have. And
so you don't believe that microbes fly all through the air and they're all over and they land everywhere and
bacteria and yeast do.
Okay. Because a lot of people like, oh, my compost pile, it's going to get it, because it's in the air and then it's going to fall in it. And that's how it gets it. And that's
100%.
not really
that happens with some microbes, but none of your fungi. Fungal spores are too heavy other than if they're in the tree right above your property and they're falling straight down. They're not blowing over your neighbor's fence or from the park across the street up over it just doesn't happen like that. Not in a way that's actually bringing about diversity. I mean, this was a PhD research project. 50 years later, they hadn't moved 100 feet.
Yeah. That was a question in chat earlier too, is like, so like you're talking about adding diversity, and if they're out in the woods and they're seeing different fungus, different mushrooms growing on different things, is that collecting that somehow and adding that to your compost? Is that a way to bring in some of that versus doing an extra?
I mean, it really isn't, because you're selecting 1 or 2 things when you're picking macro mushrooms. We're talking about 1,000 unique species, and you're like, I brought 3 new ones, and
right.
Those probably need the complementary microbes in the soil around them that they were growing with to even be a functional part. And so what you really want is the whole community in a diverse area. So you want the stuff falling out of the trees. We have all kinds of unique biology in the canopy, and you want the stuff in the soil, and you want 12 unique samples from that area, and that's where you're going to begin to really have diversity. And then you want an environment where it can be fostered, not be failing over and over, because why bother going high in diversity? I think if you're doing Synganics, JMS could be the answer for you. Super easy, liquid microbial production. You're producing mostly bacteria and yeast, but it's wild. It's indigenous. You can get it from your environment and grow it out on a couple potatoes, and you can really establish basically a lot of what you would buy, not mycos, but everything else you could buy, you can make in 36 hours with a few potatoes and a pinch of salt.
So that's a great, like what you're describing with the potato. Is that one way to collect different organisms than doing the rice that we've kind of learned over the years? So can you kind of explain different ways and techniques that you've been using to collect different organisms? Because I think that's what some people are trying to really understand is how can I collect them from my areas then? And what can I use to?
Yeah, so LAB or labs that people do, right? That's one way to get a really reliable source of lactobacilli family microbes. Those guys are amazing. They deal with your powdery mildew, they cycle nutrients, and if you look at the back of any bacterial product you're buying, they're probably lactobacilli, blah, 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 blah. They're one of the lactobacilli family microbes. Don't bother with that jug. Save $100 there. Make it yourself with a little rice wash water and some milk. So that's a great way to do it. I have a video on my website, biomay.solutions, or you can just search my name, Chris Trump, on YouTube. And that video is there teaching you straight through how to do it. Super easy. That's like a little bit of diversity, but it's indigenous. You can get a lot more diversity with genome microbial solution. So my teacher, Master Cho's son, who I also got to learn from, May said this needs to be simpler, and he grows stuff out in a bucket of water with some potatoes, and he grabs a handful of soil, some leaf litter from a wild place, puts them in a sock, puts some potatoes in a sock, smashes them up, throws a little salt in there, and covers it with a bag and hangs those socks in the middle of this 5-gallon bucket for 36 hours. It foams on the surface. It's ready to use, and you can water it into your garden. And those are diverse microbes, but all anaerobic, but a whole lot of diversity from your soil. Basically, it's like a kind of like a compost extract from a wild place. Compost extract is another thing that you can do. Get a bunch of different compost, good compost, put it like a big, you're making a pot of auto drip coffee, and pour water through it. Now take that water and pour that into your containers, water it in, water, whatever. And you're now taking the wash off, all the microbes that are washing off that compost or that leaf litter, and you're putting it into your system. Now, is your system a environment that can foster some of these things? Because if it's not, you're wasting your time. And so keep it simpler. Stay with the simpler preparations. I guess in that kind of range of living soil that we talked about, from straight cocoa and salts to deep bed systems, you don't need to go all highly fungal diverse IMO if you're doing salted cocoa. You're going to benefit just from some lactic acid bacteria and maybe even some JMS. Like, you're going to benefit from really simple preparations, because you're not going to have fungi thriving in that system or cycling nutrients in that system. Whereas living soil, you want to get that fungal up, because in a living soil system, cannabis likes a 30-to-1 to 100-to-1 plus fungal to bacteria ratio.
So at that rate, do I need cover crop to help keep some of that diversity of biology I'm adding in there alive? Because we know different cover crops use different biology.
Do we know that?
Well,
or do the microbes adapt to? We don't know too much about that. I think we know more than we do. Yeah, I think cover crop's great, but think of, you need the energy plugged in. So microbes are in the soil are not taking energy from your solar. So your lights or your sun is not giving energy directly to the soil. It's getting it through the plants, who are pushing it down to the soil. That's the plug into your stereo system. There's nothing happening if you're not plugged in. So if you're chopping down your cannabis and there's nothing happening on the whole surface for now 2 weeks, yeah, that's a bad thing. Everything is dormancy, and maybe some of it wakes back up. And so no, you would definitely want something that's continuing to photosynthesize. You want to keep watering it. If you got a living soil system, that's alive. It's a creature, trillion creatures. You need it to continue to function as nature does. Even in a dry environment where, yeah, I won't go into this. Not a good analogy.
Oh, but people say you can't do living beds indoor, Chris. I mean, come on. I mean, like, now explain to people like we really can't, because there's a lot of people out there that say it's not possible, it's a waste of time. Like, would you do it at your own house using, different fruits, vegetables, living bed, small pots, 10 gallons, 15 gallons? Is it worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I I bought a plant of basil this year in November. Came in a pot, beautiful from the grocery store, right? And I'm looking at that, and I know that either I harvest all of that and I have one round of basil, that's my option, or I need to put it into some real soil if I want to get basil continually throughout the winter. I can't leave it in this salts and cocoa media and expect it to continue to produce, right? If I'm not adding salts or but really they make those pots so that this plant can get germinated and grow and get about to this high so they can sell it and people can cut it down and make their pesto. And it's cute, but it's not going to keep producing, even if I water it and put it in the sun, because that is a winding down battery that has no charge. So I wanted some basil all winter, so I I unpotted it, broke up, got a lot of that off, and I put it in some living soil that I got from my outside garden bed that's 3 feet tall by 2 feet wide of living soil. And I put a bunch of soil in there and I planted it in. And initially it was kind of like, whoa, I got big change and I had a hard time. And then it grew all winter and we cut off of it and cooked with it. And it's still growing and it's beautiful. It just needed the sun, it needed the window. And I have a big old bountiful basil plant and that will keep growing. But yeah, so living soil indoors, totally possible. But you see the difference between those two scenarios. It's it's possible to do living soil indoors. I wouldn't put it in a little planter pot like I did with my basil, but it still is something, It's diverse nutrients and some life that persists. It gets watered. It has real soil. But yeah, I think it's plant specific, right? My little baby basil plant that I never need to get big for commercial harvest. I just need to be able to snip of it sometimes and have it stay healthy. I basically have a bonsai basil plant, So if you want yeah, I don't know. I think there's so many unique needs and scenarios for cannabis, and indoor growth that it's like, well, I need it to be all enclosed in my closet. It's like, okay, well then you got so many options, and so I think it's but there's yeah, I did a massive install of indoor living soil beds. They're now in their fifth year, going in their fifth year of full production. They've been getting swapped out. One of the premier hash companies in Colorado.
And this one went quick, guys. This episode went fast. I can't believe it's already after 10, man. This one flew through. I can't thank you enough, Mr. Trump, for coming and hanging out again, giving us a second chance to answer some questions. Your time's very valuable, and I appreciate you hanging out with us again.
I'm so sorry about being late. I really thought I was early out, 10 minutes ahead of time and rap with you guys, and no, my bad.
And please don't take like me being sarcastic as like our haters, the people that try to, on the other side of, oh, we lost him. There he goes.
I think he was just trying to adjust his phone there.
Yeah.
I don't think he meant to bail.
Chris is a cool kid, for sure.
Eagle, your mic's really quiet for some reason
Oh,
now. There you
yeah,
go.
it's the new mic. I'm used to the other mic's got a nice mute button that I can hit. This one's a dial that I spin. So I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
know the way.
that's better.
Appreciate that though.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one went fast. Hopefully, well, maybe you'll come back and say goodbye. But we appreciated your time, Mr. Trump. Was an awesome conversation.
He answered a lot of questions that, a lot of people have always kind of wondered. A lot of the conversation that we talked last time when we had internet problems and couldn't get him on then, that we brought up, and it was great. Like the pressure using oxygen down in your root zone. Um, that is something that Oregon Cannabis, YouTube channel years ago, always talked about doing like a DWC in a micro sip type container and getting the benefits of soil on top, but like water underneath with oxygen pushing through it. And so it was really interesting to kind of hear that, from Chris.
Yeah,
And
very smart guy. That's for sure. I mean to cut you off, honey.
no, just some of the FFJ and FPJ conversation, because there's a lot of misconception out there of like when to use it, how to use it. And I
I have
think he really straightened a lot of that out for us too.
I still have some questions about like kind of inputs and stuff like that. I've watched him make some IMO4 and base ingredients were like ginger and garlic. So I'm kind of curious on like the variants of like what you can use in some of these, ferments and stuff like that. So
Well, and I wanted one last question was ask him about his ginger beer, because
ah,
that was the last conversation we were talking with him, that he's making ginger beer, and it's really interesting to me. Like I want to hear his process.
well, I'm sure we can get him back for another episode. We just got to take better notes on them questions. But yeah,
We'll have to get the chat to kind of somehow get it highlighted, like Eagle at Eagle, with the question, so we can try to remember to write them down.
right, right. It does help a lot for you guys to add us when you do have a question
Mhm.
for sure.
And then who else are our guests coming up?
Well, I don't I will be honest about this, Matty. I only like to divulge a little bit at a time because I like to be first for one.
It's good.
I like to keep them wondering. But next week, the next episode, we got Nick from the Rooted Leaf coming to hang out and talk with us. So, but besides
That's
that,
woo, so many questions coming.
we
Holy
definitely
shit.
have some good ones coming after that. But I don't want to divulge first, man. If I tell them who's a month and a half away,
No, I just need to know who the heck I need to prepare for. Like, I knew we had Nick coming up. I just wasn't sure where. And a lot of Nick's conversation lately about heavy metals and his view on it has been like mine. Like, I'm not like overly concerned. It's a concern if you really want it to be. But listening to Nick in the last couple of videos, he's talked about heavy metals has been really interesting to me. So I've got some questions.
well, there's a ton of good people coming on for sure between us all. I'm sure we've got a great few episodes coming up. That's for sure. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hanging out with Nick the next episode for sure. Full show.
Awesome, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Smiley.
Uh,
Medically fit,
Eagle.
Carlton, Future Seed Network. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you guys. Thank you guys all. Appreciate all you guys.
Eagle, the show continues to grow and continue to get great information on. And thank you very much for continuing to put it together for everybody and us included. And
Thank you guys, man.
Um,
I listen, you guys had all of it. You guys had all of it. So I appreciate you guys.
one
But
follow-up,
no, it's
one follow-up comment can I make? I just
absolutely.
put I just put out part 6 of regenerative cover cropping today, and it's a good broad overview of a lot of the stuff that was discussed tonight. So might be worth checking out, give you a good base information for hopefully we can get Chris back. And I know we got a bunch of other awesome guests coming that'll bring a lot more detail to this conversation. So I don't know, just 2 cents if you give shit.
You
Anyway,
guys
thank
do
you.
have some people you'd like to see come and hang on the show with us, or if you're great organics and you have a lot of knowledge and you'd like to be a guest, go ahead and hit one of us up and talk with us about it as well.
Well, I kind of want to know how, like, you guys, the panelists, and our guests feel about even some people in the medical industry, like talking about what they're finding research, like maybe Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, or maybe Kevin McNamara from Medical Genomics. Somebody, maybe we can find somebody like that and not just talk cannabis, but the medical side of what the research is, and like maybe with hop laden virus, kind of tie some of this stuff in. I think that if you guys like that, maybe we could reach out to some of those people as well and see
Well,
if we can get them.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just gonna
No.
say, yeah, no, these people will like to learn, and yeah, I can see it. I can see knowledge is knowledge. It all relates, right?
To be continued.
What's
All
that?
right.
It's to be continued then, huh?
Yes, always ongoing learning curve till we die, right? That's the idea.
So when do we all get together again, Eagle? When's the next
The
wormhole?
29th, March 29th, I believe, is that next Friday. So that on your calendar. 2 weeks from today.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, with that being said, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, unless, of course, you guys pop into a weed nerd world. Keep in mind, you're always welcome there as well. But if not, till then, I appreciate you guys. I don't think they can hear that. I think that's just on our end.
I think so.
With that being said, thank you guys 100% for continuing to do this. And the rest of you guys, thank you as well. Don't forget to do something nice for somebody. Random acts of kindness do save lives. And with that being said, we are out of here, guys. Thank you. Hold on. As soon as I find that button.